Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring a small green island on the edge of Europe that has left an absolutely colossal footprint on the world. And I want to hook you right away with this. Dotted all across the Irish landscape are megalithic stone tombs that are over 5,000 years old. Yep, you heard that right. That means these structures were standing long before the Egyptian pyramids were even a blueprint. So from ancient mysteries to a vibrant modern society, we've got a seriously fascinating story to unpack today. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a fun question that always seems to come up. Why are there absolutely no snakes in Ireland? Well, according to popular legend, the famous St. Patrick chased every single one of them off the island and into the sea. It's a great story for sure, but the scientific reality is a bit more grounded. The truth is that during the last ice age, the freezing climate and the physical separation of the island simply kept snakes from ever making it there in the first place. Because of this, locals and tourists alike can wander the beautiful mountains and forests completely worry-free. Ireland also boasts a really unique demographic quirk. If you spot someone with natural red hair and pale skin, there's a very high chance they've got Irish roots. Actually, 10% of the entire Irish population are natural redheads. That gives this island the highest concentration of natural red hair anywhere in the world.
And speaking of roots, wrap your head around this staggering number. 40 million. That is the estimated number of people of Irish descent living just in the United States today. Now, to put that massive diaspora into perspective, the actual population living on the island of Ireland today is only about 5.5 million people. Think about that. There are roughly 8 times as many Irish Americans as there are residents of Ireland itself. It's just wild.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover Welcome to the Emerald Isle, Celts, Saints, and Vikings, Conquest and Colonization, Famine, Rebellion and Independence, Partition and the Troubles, and finally, a modern, thriving Ireland.
Welcome to the Emerald Isle, a land of rain and warmth.
Let's zoom out for a quick second to just appreciate the sheer physical beauty of this place. Because of its incredibly frequent rainfall, the island is blanketed in a lush, vibrant green, which is exactly how it earned the famous nickname, the Emerald Isle. But hey, don't let the chilly, rainy weather fool you. The warmth of the local culture and the exceptionally friendly people more than make up for the overcast skies. Let's look at some cultural staples that make this country so totally unique. First off, Ireland is the only country in the world to have a musical instrument, the harp, as its national symbol. It's also the true birthplace of Halloween. It originated from an ancient village festival called Samhain, where locals lit fires to ward off ghosts. Pretty cool, right? And we literally cannot talk about Ireland without mentioning the pub culture. There are over 7,000 pubs here, including Sean's Bar, which dates all the way back to the 9th century. In these pubs, sitting and talking for 5 or 6 hours is totally the norm. Being silent? Well, that's practically viewed as a crime. Oh, and one more thing. On this island, sheep actually outnumber humans.
Section 2. Celts, Saints, and Vikings. Early invasions. So you might be wondering, how did such a peaceful, friendly, community-focused landscape develop such a complex and deeply scarred political history? Well, it started with continuous waves of arrivals. In the first millennium BC, the Iron Age Celts arrived. They brought the Gaelic language and a clan-based society led by druids and chieftains. Fast forward to the 5th century AD, and figures like St. Patrick introduced Christianity, which sparked this incredible golden age of monasteries and learning. But, as you can probably guess, all that wealth attracted attention. Vikings from Scandinavia started raiding in 795 AD, and these Vikings didn't just raid, they eventually settled. They actually founded Ireland's very first major towns, including Dublin and Cork, before their political power was finally broken by the Irish High King Brian Boru at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014.
Section 3. Conquest and Colonization. The English Arrival.
While the Vikings were eventually just assimilated into Irish culture, the 12th century introduced a brand new power dynamic, one that would permanently alter the island's destiny. The tightening grip of English rule kicked off in 1169, when Anglo-Norman knights arrived to settle a local dispute. This prompted the English king Henry II to step in and claim authority. By the time we get to the 16th century, the Tudor dynasty, which was now Protestant, aggressively pushed to control Catholic Ireland. They instituted these plantations, forcibly confiscating land from native Gaelic lords and handing it over to loyal Protestant settlers from Britain, especially up in Ulster. This simmering tension erupted into outright war, leading us to 1649. That's when the Puritan commander Oliver Cromwell arrived, suppressing Catholic uprisings with a ruthless, merciless military campaign.
Now, the devastating impact of Cromwell's campaign was immediate. Prior to all this, Catholics owned the vast majority of the island. But because of massive, punitive land confiscations given to Cromwell's soldiers and supporters, by the 1650s, the native Catholic population was left owning only about 10% of the land. Just 10%. They were systematically stripped of their basic rights, forbidden from holding public office, voting, or even inheriting property under a harsh regime known as the Penal Laws.
Section 4. Famine, Rebellion, and Independence, a Century of Struggle. Entering the 19th century, Ireland faced a period defined by unimaginable tragedy, but also by a fierce, organized resistance that would eventually redraw the map. The defining event here was the Great Famine. By the 1840s, millions of landless rural poor were almost entirely dependent on the humble potato to survive. So when a fungal blight repeatedly destroyed the potato crops starting in 1845, a completely catastrophic famine ensued. And what made this disaster so deeply bitter was that the British government's response was painfully slow. Incredibly, food was still being exported out of Ireland while the local poor starved to death. To really understand the gravity of this, look at the numbers. Before the famine, Ireland's population had swelled to over 8 million people. But between 1845 and 1849, approximately 1 million people died from starvation and disease. Another 1 million fled the country as refugees, mostly heading to places like the United States and Australia. In just a few short years, the island lost a quarter of its entire population. That effectively broke apart the old Gaelic-speaking society forever. All that accumulated grief and anger over British rule ultimately exploded in the 20th century. In 1916, rebels staged the Easter Rising in Dublin. Now, even though it was quickly crushed, the execution of its leaders ignited massive public support for outright independence. This led to a landslide election victory for the Republican Party, Sinn Féin, in 1918, and it sparked the Irish War of Independence, where the newly formed Irish Republican Army used guerrilla tactics against British forces from 1919 to 1921. Section 5. Partition and the Troubles. A Divided Island.
The War of Independence ended in a treaty, but the solution created a profound geopolitical division, one that would lead to decades of conflict. In 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty partitioned the island into two separate jurisdictions. The Book of the Island, meaning 26 counties, left the United Kingdom to become the self-governing Irish Free State in the south. This would eventually become the fully independent Republic of Ireland. However, 6 northeastern counties, which had a Protestant pro-British majority, opted to remain part of the United Kingdom. This region became known as Northern Ireland. This partition left a pretty sizable Catholic minority inside Northern Ireland, leading to systemic tensions. By the late 1960s, a civil rights movement escalated into a deeply tragic 3-decade period known as the Troubles. This was a highly complex sectarian conflict. It involved Catholic nationalists, who largely sought reunification with the Republic, Protestant Unionists, who were determined to defend their union with Britain, and the deployment of the British Army. Paramilitaries on both sides engaged in bombings and violence, tragically leaving civilians caught right in the crossfire.
After years of intense war weariness, incredible diplomatic efforts finally led to the historic Good Friday Agreement in April 1998. This agreement basically legislated a structural peace. It mandated a power-sharing government in Belfast where both communities governed jointly. Crucially, it acknowledged both identities. It allowed people in Northern Ireland to hold British citizenship, Irish citizenship, or both, and it set up cross-border cooperation with the Republic.
Section 6. A Modern, Thriving Ireland. Peace and Prosperity.
Bringing our narrative full circle to the present day. With the violence of the past largely settled, both parts of this resilient island have experienced an incredible rebound. For the Republic of Ireland, the peace of the 1990s coincided with a massive economic boom. Through really strategic investments in education and industry, Ireland transitioned from being one of Western Europe's poorest countries into one of its wealthiest. Today, it stands as a massive global technology hub. I mean, heavy hitters like Google and Apple have chosen to host major operations right there on the island.
And modern Irish life today? It's this vibrant blend of the ancient and the new. Over 10 million tourists flock to the island annually to see breathtaking natural sights like the 214-meter-high cliffs of Moher, or to experience medieval history at places like the 15th century Bunratty Castle. The locals enjoy incredibly high living standards, an excellent work-life balance with a relaxed pace,
and a deeply family-oriented culture where traditional music sessions still ring out in the local pubs.
Now, to give you a sense of just how rapidly this society has modernized its laws and culture alongside its economy, consider this surprising fact. Because of the historical influence of the Catholic Church, divorce was actually a criminal offense in Ireland until 1996. No way, right? The fact that the country has transformed so profoundly in just a few short decades is a true testament to its forward-looking momentum. So what should we take away from all this? The Emerald Isle has transformed from a land ravaged by famine and colonization into a peaceful, thriving beacon of culture and technology. As cross-border cooperation continues to strengthen everyday life, it leaves us with one deeply provocative question. Will the peace and shared prosperity of the last few decades eventually lead to a united Ireland? It's a fascinating thought to end on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.